What women in the Bible do I take inspiration from? This is one of the questions that I received at my Instagram account, Amazingly Deep Thoughts. And this lady said that it was something that she and her mother had done a devotion on. And I thought that was really wonderful just to even see that a mom and a daughter were talking and engaging about Bible study. And it made me ponder and think about it. And I actually talked to my mom about it. She doesn't live near me, but we talk on the phone every week. And I told her that the two characters that I picked, and the first one is Tabitha, and also known as Dorcas, but I don't want to call her Dorcas because Dork, who wants to be labeled by Dork? But she said she doesn't like the name Tabitha because of the show Bewitched when she was little. So, either way, Tabitha, also known as Dorcas, who you can find in Acts 9:36 through 42. She said when she was little, she was at a Bible school program, and kind of like a vacation Bible school, and they had that final week play that everybody did, and her job was to go, "She's dead! She's dead!" And everyone gathered around the house, and she told this little narration, and it was so sweet that she remembers that as a 70-something-year-old woman back from when she was 8 or 9. So the Bible sticks in people's hearts. Tabitha, the reason why I admire Tabitha and why she inspires me is because she is a single lady. She is a widow. So you don't hear much in the Bible about women who are single or women who are widows. And, you hear about Anna the prophetess, who started out as a young widow and just chose to live the rest of her life unmarried. But there are some seasons in life that we don't really hear a lot about in Scripture. And widowhood or being single is kind of this, it could be a tumultuous time. It could be an inward looking time. It could be a self-centered time. Like, here I am in my time of need. What can people do for me? Or it could be like, maybe it's somebody who raised their children. And I look at women who are in my season who are homeschooling and also being a homemaker, and it's just very full days that are productive and worthwhile, and you can look back with a sense of satisfaction. But there's almost this American philosophy of, when can I retire? When can I say that I did my job and I can move on? And I feel like that Tabitha is an inspiration that once you have reached that third season of life, because raising children is there are full days, and you get to decide what you're doing with your days. But when you don't have to purposefully serve people who are at your beck and call every day, which is kind of what singlehood and widowhood is, you could choose to live for yourself. You could. But Tabitha didn't. She chose to spend her time with the other widows and making coats and garments for others. She used those skills that she had learned throughout life and just kept working and just kept serving and became profitable for the sake of other people. And I really hope that, I have 10 more years probably with my children at home in this season of work, but that next season, like you have a good 20 to 30 years. What does a woman do in that next season with everything that you've learned and the wisdom that you gained and the skills that you developed? What are you going to do with that? And Tabitha is a reminder to me that you don't just get to check out and say, well, I did my time. So the next person isn't actually a person. I don't know if you can hear my son in the background, but he's chatty. He's a little bit like me. It's actually, the Bible labels them as the holy women also, and they are in 1 Peter 2:18 through 3 verse 6. It's actually 1 Peter 3:6 that around there that talks about them. But to understand why they impacted my life so much, you have to look at 1 Peter 2:18. Or even 1 Peter 3 verse 1, because it says, likewise ye wives. And to understand, well, what do you mean likewise? What do you mean likewise? So you have to look to what it was referring to. And in that section, it's referring to First Peter 2, verse 18. It says, be subject to your masters, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. And there is, it's a touchy topic that we're supposed to be in subjection to our husbands as servants were to their masters, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. That is biblical. So then the question is how far do you interpret that? And then you look through in verse 19 where the word says they're suffered wrongfully. And then verse 20, Jesus being buffeted wrongfully, or I don't know if that was Jesus, but it says being buffeted wrongfully with patience. Verse 21, Christ also suffered, leaving us an example. In verse 23, when Christ suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. And that is the passage that goes right into likewise ye wives. And you're like, what? Wait a minute. Our God is a God of love. Why in the world would he tell us to be in subjection to a husband that might cause suffering? And at this point, this is when I go to understanding that God gives situational ethics for the case of human life. God does not say that we should stay in a situation where our imminent harm is there, where we are physically abused, where our lives are in danger. You can see this by the example of the midwives in Exodus who, when Pharaoh told them to kill the babies that the Israelites had, and they were like, oh my, these Israelite women are not like us. They just have those babies so fast. And God blessed them for fearing the Lord and saving lives. You look at Rahab, who saved the lives of the Israelite spies, and she lied to save their lives, and God blessed her faith. Abigail, to save the life of her wicked husband, and so that there wasn't a war, she kind of went behind her husband's back and dealt wisely in disobedience to her husband's orders to save lives. So there are clauses in Scripture in 1 Corinthians 7. It says that the wives are not to depart from the husband, but and if she depart, that she's to remain unmarried or reconciled. And so you can see that God is not condoning the abuse to the harm of somebody's life. He's not condoning that, but there are some sufferings that are just emotional heavy weights that we carry. Sometimes we have husbands who are so caught up in pride that they're narcissistic scorners, and the Bible does not give a clause to leave because somebody is a jerk. I wish it did. And if it does, please show me that scripture. But I have not seen it anywhere. And what does this have to do with the holy women also? Because there was a time in my life where I was really struggling with my security. Like, I felt when we were first young and we were first married, and my husband, they have polar opposite personalities, but very similar ideals. And he lives in the moment and I lived in the future, and he would make decisions where I would be like, oh no, that might end up horribly. And he's just like, YOLO, you only live once, let's have fun in the moment. And this caused me fear and anxiety. And he was not a froward spouse, but the same principle is true. There comes a point when you have to put your trust in God, like the women of old, the holy women also who trusted in God. And that's what he's trying to point to, that Jesus could look at God the Father's big plan and say, I'm going to trust God, and I'm strong enough to take these hits. I know that no matter what happens, God can give me the wisdom and the peace and the love and the joy and the long suffering to please Him in spite of my circumstances. But we're so wrapped up in ease, and we're so wrapped up in comfort, and we get really wrapped up in the fear of, how are my children going to end up, forsaking free will, thinking that we have all of this control, that if we do everything perfectly, then everything will work out perfectly. And that's just not true. Time and chance happens to everybody. But if we can anchor our trust in God, like those holy women also who trusted in Him, then we can have peace and joy in spite of our circumstances, in spite if we are given more than we can handle, in spite of if our children choose to go against the Lord, in spite of if our husband choose to bankrupt us. And that causes suffering. We can choose to trust God, that we can serve Him, and we can love our enemies. And sometimes our spouses are our enemies. Just because you're Christian doesn't mean that your spouse is going to be all, knight in shining armor. We are flesh and we are free will. And if we stop seeking God, we will end up right back where we started from, except for still we're saved. So I just regularly go back to that. That was like my Bethel moment, and like that's the 7th year of my marriage where I say I learned to shut up and pray. So those holy women also, they changed my marriage, and I was so when I learned to shut up and pray and trust God, and I would kind of get quiet, and I'm not naturally I'm more of a person who would discuss problems to work through them, and I would start becoming quiet, and my husband would say, "Are you okay? Are things okay?" And I would say, "It's not you, it's me. I'm struggling trusting the Lord." And so every time I felt that fear and that anxiety and that desire to control or change or manipulate the circumstances to where I would feel more comfortable, I would just be quiet, and I would go and pray, and I would ask God to give me the peace to that. As I delighted myself in Him, He would give me the desires of my heart, even if it was beyond my understanding and beyond all I could ask or think. And then at our anniversary, my husband was like, "This has been the best year of our marriage ever, hasn't it?" And I was just like, "Whatever. I don't even want to talk to you. The only reason it's been a good marriage is because I shut up, and that hurts my feelings." So, yeah, those are the 2 women that I look up to that have inspired me the most. Tabitha, because she served even when she didn't have to. She could have been served, but she served. And the holy women also who trusted God.